Welcome to our Halfling, where we talk about Lord of the Rings and a little bit about D&D, so let's get to it. Today we are going over Chapter 14 of The Silmarillion of Beleriand and its realms. So basically we're just going to be talking about maps, so pretty much for most of this video it's just going to be maps. And we're going to be learning about all the lands, so let's get to it. So this chapter talks about the state of the lands and how it's divided after the third battle in the Wars of Beleriand, Dagor Eglereb. So first it begins with Angband. Beneath arid Engren, he created a great tunnel heading south of the mountains towards a great gate. Above the gate he created Thangorodrim, made from the ash and slags of his furnaces beneath. Thangorodrim was black and desolate, with smoke coming from them filling the northern sky. And for many miles there was only ash and filth before the gates of Angband, until the sun rose and all the land was then filled with lush and green grass. To the west was Hisilome, the land of mist by the Noldor. Hithlum in Sindar. The land was fair and had very cold winters, bordered by arid Lomin, or the echoing mountains, on the west, and arid Rethrin, the shadow mountains, on the east. Here Fingolfin and Fingon held the land. Fingolfin mostly was in Mithrin by the Great Lake, and Fingon was over Dorlomin, west of the mounts of Mithrin. Their capital was at Ithilcirion, where they kept watch over Ardgalen, sending riders on horseback to ride up to Thangorodrim, keeping watch. The horses here are from Madros as atonement for Losgard, where they carried the horses by ship. Nevrast, or Hithershore, was first over all the coastlands south of Firth, but eventually it only meant the shores between Drengis and Mount Taras. This land was held by Turgon the Wise, son of Fingolfin. The land is more like Beleriand than Hithlum, and is shielded by the mountains from the cold. It's a hollow land with no rivers, but a large pond named Lenalwyn, surrounded by marshes. It receives this name because of all the birds that reside here. Before the Noldor, Grey Elves lived here due to this being where Ulmo and Nose would visit in the days of old. Here's where the Sindar and the Noldor mingled and became one before any of the other gatherings. Turgon lived in his halls Vineyamar under Mount Tara by the sea. Next we have Dorthonion, which was 60 leagues from west to east, and was filled with great pines, especially in the north and western side. From the plains it rose to hardy lands, with many tall hills with lakes at their feet, with some of the hills being higher than the peaks of arid Rethrin. South towards Doriath, the land dropped to great cliffs. The northern hills of Dorthonion was watched by Angrod and Agnor, sons of Finarfin. It allowed them to watch Ardgalen. They had a small group due to this being barren land, and the highlands seemed also to be an area Morgoth wouldn't go. It was a bulwark or a solid wall-like structure for the defense. Between Dorthonion and the shadowy mounts was a narrow vale with pines on either side, and this land was very fair, with river Sirion passing through. Finrod controlled this land and built Minas Tirith on Tol Sirion as a watchtower, but after Nargothrond gave this to his brother Orderthred. The country of Beleriand lies on both sides of river Sirion, up to Ardgalen, to the mountains, and south 130 leagues, down to the Bay of Balad. West Beleriand had the forest of Brethil and the realm of Nagathron. The river Narog was 80 leagues long from Ivrin to Nantathrin, the land of willows. South of Nantathrin, the land was full of flowers, and few lived here due to all the marshes around the mouths of Sirion. Nagathron extended west to river Neming to the sea Aglarest. Finrod was chief of all the elves from Sirion to the sea, except for the Falas. The Falas were led by Círdan, the shipbuilder. Círdan and Finrod were allies and were able to rebuild Brithrombar and Eglarest. They became quaint towns and harbors with piers of stone. West of Eglarest, Finrod built the tower of Barad Nimraz to watch over the seas, though Morgoth never came by sea due to his servants hating water. With aid, the people of Nagathran built ships and explored the Isle of Balad, creating a refuge here just in case, though none of them would ever live here. The realm of Finrod was the largest, even though he was the youngest of the lords of Noldor, going from Fingolfin, Fingon, Madros, Finrod, Felagund. Fingolfin was king over the Noldor, and after him Fingon, even though their realm was the northern part of Hithlum. Their people were more hardy, and the orcs feared them most, and Morgoth hated them most. East Beleriand, at its widest, Syrian Tegelion, and the borders of Osirion, was 100 leagues. Between Sirion and Mindeb was the land of Dimbar. Under the peaks of Crisagrim lived the eagles. Between River Mindeb and Escalduin laid Nan Dungortheb, where Ungoliant lived, and this was bordered by Melian's girdle and Ered Gorgoroth, mountains of terror. This land was filled with webs and filth. The waters here would consume a person with madness and despair. The Noldor would pass through only at great need, by paths already made by Morgoth in days of old, when he returned to Middle-earth, going from Escalduin and the stone bridge of Aent Ior through Dordinian, the Silent Land, crossing Arziak, or Fords of Aros, to the north marches of Beleriand. Next is Doriath, where lived Thingol the Hidden King, where only those who he allowed could pass through. The northern area was the forest Neldoreth, which was bounded by the river Escalduin. Between Aros and Escalduin was the thicker forest of Regen. The southern part of Escalduin, turning towards Sirion, were the caves of Menegrath. Most of Doriath was east of Sirion, with only a small forest between Tengilin and Sirion, named Nivrem, the West March, named by the people of Doriath, which was filled with great oak trees. It was encompassed under the girdle so that some of Sirion would be protected in reverence to Ulmo, and was also one of Melian's favorite places. In the southwest area of Doriath was where the river Aros met Sirion, and here were many pools and marshes on both sides of the river. This was named Ailin Uyal, the Twilight Meres. This area was engulfed by mist, and Melian's girdle was over this land as well. River Sirion was divided by Ailin Uyal, where the land fell steeply. Looking from the south towards the north, the area from Eglares to Narog to Aman Ereb appeared like an endless chain of hills. River Narog came through these hills in a deep gorge with no fall, and on its western side was the wooded highland Tar en Farath, and the small foaming stream Ringwell into Narog is where Finrod built Nagathran. 25 leagues east, Sirion fell below the Meres, underground, into tunnels, coming up again 3 leagues south, creating the gates of Sirion. The divide was named Andram, the long wall from Nagathran to Ramdal, the wall's end. The divide became shorter towards Ramdal, growing closer to the river Gelion, that was calmer, with no falls, but was a faster stream. Between Ramdal and Gelion was a single hill named Aman Ereb. It appeared larger than it was due to it being alone. Here is where Denethor died, coming to aid Thingol in his fight against Morgoth. South of Amdram, between Sirion and Gelion, was Tar im Duniath, the forest between rivers. No one came here except for some wandering elves, due to it being a wild land of tangled forest. Gelion was a large river with 2 sources, Little Gelion from Hemring and Greater Gelion from Mount Redir, flowing 40 leagues before River Asgard, being twice as long as Sirion, though not as wide or full due to Hithlum and Dorthonion receiving more rain. From Everluin came River Asgard, later named Rathloriel. Next was River Thalos, River Legolin, River Brilthor, River Dulwin, and River Andrant. Between River Gelion and Eredwithrin, and between Asgard and River Adruent, was Osirion, the land of 7 rivers. River Duriant splits and joins again, creating a little island, Tol Galen, the Green Isle. And here is where Beren and Luthien live after their return. In Osirion lived the Green Elves, protected by the rivers, being the second most loved river by Olmo, next to Sirion. Their woodcraft was so that any stranger who passed through Osirion would never see them. They were green, and their singing could be heard across Gelion, so that the Noldor named this area Lindon, the land of music, and the mountains Ered Lindon. East of Dorthonion, the land was most likely to be attacked in the open land, and here at the March of Madros was where Feanor's sons lived with many people. The riders would pass through the northern plains, Lothlin, to keep watch of Morgoth. The main city of Madros was on the hill of Himring, the ever-cold, and was wide with no trees and flat on its summit, surrounded by smaller hills. Between Himring and Dorthonion was the Pass of Anglon, and this was a gate to Doriath. There was always a bitter wind coming from the north here. And Celagorm and Curufin fortified Anglon and held this land of Himlad between Aros and Celion to Himring. Between Little and Greater Gelion was Maglor's Gap, where there were no hills, and through here is where the orcs would pass before the third battle. So here the Noldor had a great cavalry, and the people of Caranthir fortified the mountains east of Maglor. Mount Rerir was smaller than Ered Luin and came out from the main mountain range. In this area between mountains was Lake Halavorn. It was deep and dark. Next to this is where Caranthir lived. The land between Gelion and Mount Rerir and River Ascar was Thar Gelion, land beyond Gelion, or Dort Caranthir, land of Caranthir, by the Noldor. And here is where Caranthir met the dwarves. The Grey Elves called this land Talath Ruinen, the East Vale. Therefore the sons of Feanor under Madros were lords over East Beleriand. Most of their people lived in the northern region, only going south to hunt. However, the southern region is where Amrad and Amras lived, coming seldom north except during the siege. Many lords would pass through this land because it was so fair. Finrod Felaghan came often because he loved to wander and even became friends of the green elves in Ossidian. None ever went over Ered Luin, and little news, and too late, came to Beleriand east of the mountains. So that's this chapter. It's a pretty short video, but pretty informative. I gotta say, this was a pretty hard chapter for me to get through because I just couldn't get into it. And the only way I could get into it was having the maps right next to me the whole time. So I hope having the maps during this video was helpful and informative to you guys and kind of fleshed out more of Middle-earth for you and kind of made it come alive. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and may your homes be filled with food and cheer. Bye!